Hi everyone, I'm back again. Today's a busy day. I did a live in the morning and I'm doing another one now in the evening, my time. I know this is a less popular time slot, but I have a night to myself. The kids are out, and so I thought it would be a good time to try and record one while I have some time and some energy to do so. So this one won't be super long. It's not anything, I suppose, groundbreaking. It's just analysing a little bit more of the phone data, looking specifically at the Instagram photos that have been discussed a little bit by a few other creators. And I thought I would throw some ideas into the mix. Hi, Nicole. Hi, I'm Sarah. Great to see you guys. So, yeah, I did a live this morning, which was an update on geofencing. It was a little bit messy because I struggled with technology. So I am also going to upload that as a briefer version, cutting out all of the wasted time at the beginning, worrying about technology, and just a bit of an edited version, because I think there's some key points still. The geofencing is such a big part of the flawed case, and I really just think it's super, super important. Today's video isn't super related to Rick himself. This is more looking at Libby's phone data and trying to explain some of the things that seem like anomalies. And so, yeah, it's like I said, it's not groundbreaking. It's not going to necessarily be super relevant, I suppose, for Rick's case, but I guess it still helps us to put together clues or information around what actually may or may not have happened for the girls. And of course, our primary motive is to get justice for Rick and the girls, of course. As I've said many times, I still fear that we won't ever potentially have the full answer for the girls, but I do feel like we can potentially help Rick. And that's why that tends to be my primary focus. But of course, it's no less important to actually try and figure out what happened to the girls and help them have true justice as well. Hi, Diana. Really nice to see you. You caught me. Yeah, I am on fire with the lives. I'm doing so many of them at the moment. I'm trying to squeeze a lot in when I have free time. And next week I'm going to a conference. I'll be away and staying with friends. So I probably won't be able to duck out as much. But you never know. I'm a little bit obsessed right now, aren't I? So who knows? I might sneak out and still do some lives. But yeah, I thought I'd get them all in while I have some time. And this weekend I definitely have some time. So without further ado, I'll go into it. I think with all of the lives that have, I suppose, content that's got some factual or evidence related content, I will probably try to edit the videos and pop them up as edited videos as well as the lives, because I know people don't always want to hear all the chitter chatter that goes on between us and all the moments where I'm fiddling with slides and messing around with technology or talking to my dog. So yeah, if you guys are not wanting to watch this in full and want to get the bare bones, then I will try to edit and upload those videos. But I've already spent 4 minutes doing exactly what I'm going to edit out, which is just talking. So let's get stuck into it. Now, when I focus on Libby's phone and the evidence, it's not always a popular opinion. I do think that I'm always open to all possibilities. And as much as, of course, I'm always here to advocate for Rick, and I truly do believe he's factually innocent, there are aspects sometimes that are discussed in this case where I maybe tend to have, I guess, I don't know how to word it, but I guess like the Occam's razor sort of idea. I try to take a kind of simple explanation rather than jumping to angles that are more conspiratorial. Now, of course, everybody knows that I do still believe there are, I suppose, conspiratorial angles to this case. I do believe that the investigation is very murky, but there are aspects of the case that I also believe may actually have simple explanations. And the Instagram photos is one of those. I think most of the stuff with Libby's phone, I have generally tended to think there isn't a whole heap of suspicion around it. And so I know that's not always a popular opinion, but I think my saying is like, I don't think everything needs to be tampered with or a conspiracy or suspicious in order for us to advocate for justice for the girls in Rick. And I believe that, obviously where there is conspiracy or suspicion, of course, let's look at that. But if there isn't, there isn't. And I think it lends credibility to a cause when you're willing to consider all angles. And I hope that that's what I do in these videos. Yes, Sarah, the most mundane explanation is so often the right one. And I agree. So I don't agree with Occam's razor when it's applied to this case in the sense of saying, well, it must be Rick. He was there. He dressed like that. He kind of looks a bit like Bridge Guy, because I don't believe that is Occam's razor in this case. We know that the statistical chance of somebody like Rick, with the history he has being the offender of this crime, is insanely tiny. I used to always go on about the forensic unicorn term, a term that I coined with ChatGPT, my best friend, and I still stick by it. The more simpler explanation actually in this case is that there was some flaws in the investigation. We know that there are statistics that show that there are wrongdoings, whether they're innocent or malignant when it comes to law enforcement. And that percentage probability would be higher than the percentage probability of Rick being responsible for this crime. Now, I'm not saying that the percentage of chance of law enforcement doing suspicious things is super high, but it is certainly higher than the chances of a man who was 44 years old at the time, no criminal history, no signs of deviance, to have committed this crime, along with lots of other factors that I've discussed at length. Anyway, now we've spent 7 minutes before actually going into the content, so let's get stuck into it. Hi, Laura. Thanks for joining us. Oh, I've got a decent amount of you guys coming in. Thank you. I really like this time slot too, even though it's kind of a fraction of the people because of the time. I really like all the people that come in at this time. I like everybody who comes in and chats, but you guys are a really cool group. I really loved our chat last night when we were talking about the psych stuff. And I say last night, my time. It was obviously a slightly different time for you guys. Okay, so let me slow down and take my time going through a bit of the technical stuff. So this here is what we're talking about today, and it is the Instagram photos. Now, I don't know where these have originally come from. I've seen them on social media case by case. Amy has been the one who I've seen post these and discuss these. I have seen others discuss them, but I don't know the original origin of them. So I'm going to say the source is Amy and case by case, because that's where I mostly was able to source them and see them. Okay. So as always, we know the disclaimer. But what's more important is Abby and Libby, and our hearts go out to them and the people that love them. And yeah, let's dedicate everything to those two beautiful girls who deserved a far better fate in this life than what they had. So the disclaimer, as always, I am not an expert. I do most of my research with my brain that doesn't like to give up on things and just goes down every rabbit hole, and my best friend, AI. Usually ChatGPT, sometimes Perplexity AI comes into the mix if I'm not trusting ChatGPT. And when we put them together, our minds together, I think, we kind of come up with some, I think, fairly reasonable hypotheses. Nothing I say is definite, nothing I say is necessarily fact, but I think it's generally what I feel is most plausible, logical, and what practically could be going on in a case like this. So we're referring again to the phone data, the Knowledge C data, and particularly these lines down here. Okay, so this is the stuff we're talking about. Now, interestingly, apparently this isn't Knowledge C. This is another thing that Celebrite does, and we'll talk about that today a little bit later. But yeah, it's these two lines that we're referring to that say Instagram IGI image cache. Okay, so we have these two entries at 1:44 as the girls are on their way to the trails, and they are now matched up with these images that we've come across on social media. Okay, So these are the two images. And as I said, the source is case by case. So I came across these on X and also on Case by Case's YouTube channel. And these are the two images. They match the descriptions in the Libby phone data information. So the first image, I initially did not think this was the Monon High Bridge. It just looks it looks so much smaller, but it's to do with the angle and perspective. It is indeed the Monon High Bridge looking out over Deer Creek. So this is the north end of the bridge, so the end where you head towards Freedom Bridge, and that's the south end. So this here is the creek that potentially the girls cross. The crime scene is right back over here. It's out of this range, but it's on this side of the creek, but right over here. So that's picture number one. And picture number two is a picture of tree trunks. So it is a little bit of an unusual picture. I'm not sure that I would take a picture like that, but then again, I generally would just take pictures of cats and dogs most of the time, and birds and animals. But anyway, so the second picture, it's not talked about as much as the first picture, but that's a picture down here. I believe this here looks like a picture down here on the creek bedside, and I'll explain that a little bit more as we go along when I tell you my theory of what these pictures are and where they come from. So these photos, I've heard people say that these photos may have been downloaded by the girls, may have been received as instant messages by Libby, I suppose, on her phone, and that there may be some particular reason that those two photos specifically were in the cache on her phone. And I suppose I wanted to look again at what is the simplest explanation for why these two images are there. Now, we don't know specifically how she's engaging with Instagram or Snapchat. We just know when she logs into it or has it on her screen, I suppose, and it goes off again. And so it's a bit tricky because we can't actually figure out specifically how she's engaging with the app. However, given the time frame, it's 26 seconds, roughly. I mean, that's pretty exact, but anyway. Given that short time frame, she sort of logs in or opens up the app on her phone and closes it again fairly quickly. So I wondered if there were some reasonable, unsuspicious explanations for this. And what I kind of came to was that the two photos found in the cache at 1:44 are actually consistent with normal app behavior. So Instagram automatically preloads media into its cache, especially stories. So whenever the app is open. And the brief window of activity, roughly 26 seconds, shows no evidence of messaging or posting. It simply reflects the app fetching images while Libby opened or scrolled past her home screen. So it could indeed be that those two pictures were, on her feed. It could be that they were stories. It could be that they were sent to her as private messages. It could be any of the above. It's not necessarily super clear, but it's not necessarily indicative that she specifically went out looking for those particular pictures and downloaded them for future reference. So I think one of the hypotheses I've heard discussed is, did she deliberately go to look at those photos to find a particular meeting point? And I don't think that's the case. I don't think she was looking for those photos to reference necessarily. 26 seconds is pretty quick. I feel a reasonable explanation is that they were front and center on her feed for whatever reason, either stories recently in the feed from a friend or potentially also an instant message as well. So these entries indicate potentially automatic caching, not necessarily downloading, not saving or posting. The app simply stored temporary copies while refreshing the feed or stories. So Instagram caches images automatically as soon as they load or begin to render on the screen. And that means the user doesn't need to tap, like, or even scroll to create those files. The app's background prefetching does it. So the photos weren't necessarily downloaded or saved. They were probably just briefly displayed or queued. Now I'm going to read the chat because I can see, I'm sorry, you've got a few things that you're saying in here. I'm keen to hear other thoughts on this. Okay. I've still got this terribly small laptop screen. I'll actually pop your comment on the screen. The entry in com.burb Instagram, I won't read the whole thing, indicates it's most likely something she clicked on and swiped onto the next. Okay, yep. And there's a whole level of forensic analysis we don't have, and I haven't really seen mentioned. There's a whole folder for each of the social media that would say exactly how Libby used them. Yeah, for sure. And I think we're missing that. And so we're trying to kind of tie together small pieces of information. I suppose as well, I often think that if the expert witnesses didn't mention anything about this as well, I mean, hopefully they had access to all of that, then potentially there isn't anything more to it. But of course, again, that depends on whether we trust who's giving us that information. And we know, of course, that the extraction was done by the ISP, and a lot of people don't trust the ISP in this case, so it makes it tricky. But I agree, Sarah. Like, I think that, she may have clicked on it as in a story. That was kind of the thing that stuck with me. I thought, if you click on a story, that would make sense that image was kind of prioritized, perhaps. So that's what I thought. So I then was like, but why were there only 2 images? Because, when you open up Instagram, you're seeing multiple images. Again, could it be a story? And you just clicked on 2 images of a particular friend. I mean, I do this all the time. You get a notification and it's someone that you particularly like or enjoy hearing from, or, you're about to see, for example, and you're more likely to click on their story specifically. I don't watch everybody's stories. I'm not one of those people that scrolls through endless stories. Maybe occasionally, but most of the time it's like, oh, my best friend, oh, my sister, a guy that I'm interested in or something. So yeah, Instagram preloads only a small batch of media when it first opens. The short session, which is, as we said again, 26 seconds, likely refresh the 2 photos before the screen's locked. That normal behavior explains why there are exactly 2 cached entries, not a continuous list. And hi, Montana Girl. Thank you for joining us. You said, I believe the Abby Snapchat was created and uploaded, but not by Libby. Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of speculation about that Snapchat image as well. I'm not sure. I mean, my dominant theory around that at the moment is potentially that photo was taken and the phone was locked really quickly after that and never accessed again actively. And I wonder whether that has anything to do with what's stored in cache. I don't know, though. So I think that still remains a mystery for a lot of us. It hasn't really been explained, has it? So I think, yeah, all theories are on the table. So this was what I was referring to before, and I think, Sarah, I think you might be also referring to this as well. So this is the difference between Knowledge C and IG image cache. So they both show up on this data set, but they're actually separate. So I think, again, I don't want to butcher this because it's not my area of expertise, but I think the Knowledge C data might say, Instagram was in focus, but then you would have to cross-check with the IG image cache, which is on the phone as well, and it's to do with the Instagram app itself, to see what was actually done during that session, if that makes sense. And I don't know how much information it actually gives, so I think it's just image cache. Montana says, if you watch EOA, shows exactly how it's created. Yeah, I'll have to check it out. I have seen some of EOA's videos. I watch a lot of videos on this. I try to kind of have a look at all the different creators and gather all the information. So I'll definitely check it out. So what you're going to see sorry about all the today too, guys, because this is an area where I'm thinking a lot before I say things, because it's certainly not an area of expertise for me. But what the difference is that Knowledge C information shows records when an app is on screen or device state changes, and it persists for days or weeks. It's retained for a long time. It doesn't show photos or DMs, only timestamps and focus events. It's seen in reports as Instagram in focus or Instagram in the foreground, I think is actually what it says, screen on, off, etc. And the relationship is knowledge C shows when Instagram was open and when it was back in the background. But the IG image cache stores temporary image data downloaded by Instagram, for example, and I think it does the same with Snapchat. It is more volatile, so auto-deleted or replaced quickly, kind of purged over time. It has actual JPEGs briefly fetched by the app. It's that image entry that Sarah just said. I'm not going to read out the whole line, but that's what it's seen as in the reports. And then relationship case shows what images were temporarily loaded. So Sarah says, that's why I think it appears in the Knowledge C data is because the app actively engaged the phone's hard drive to cache the pictures. It's an event. Yeah, I think so. I think that's probably how they do it. So this is just, again, explaining Celebrite, because this was just news to me. I thought Knowledge C just had all of this information in it. And so I kept thinking to myself, well, why are we then only seeing these 2 pictures? We're not seeing a whole lot of other pictures, because, you know, she's accessed Instagram at other times in the sort of 2-ish days of data we have on the spreadsheet. And so, yeah, Celebrite basically combines multiple data sources, so Knowledge C, app containers, into one unified timeline. So the Instagram cache image lines in the report come from the Instagram app folder, not from Knowledge C itself. So I think that's what I just explained. Celebrite simply aligns the timestamps so investigators can correlate Instagram in focus or in foreground at 1:44 to cached images created at 1:44. The cached entries are real app artifacts, but they appear alongside Knowledge C events only because Celebrite merges them for context. So I think that's right. Correct me if I'm wrong, of course. This is just a research that I've done, and we all know that AI is not always accurate, unfortunately. And I know when it's being inaccurate about things that I know a lot about, but this is not an area of expertise. But just some interesting thoughts here. I'm not trying to suggest, like I said before, that this is an expert opinion. It clearly isn't, unless you can get a degree on ChatGPT, which I think would potentially be in line with some of law enforcement's decisions in this case. But yeah. Yes, I'm sorry. ChatGPT hallucinates wildly, for sure. It was saying these photos were taken by Quiche or something. I'm like, who's Quiche? Where have you come up with Quiche? Who's like, and it was like a friend of the girls. I'm like, no, I don't actually even know who you're talking about. I'm like, can you just not add any silly details here? Honestly, it's very naughty. So yeah, sorry, Quiche, whoever you are, but I know you're not actually involved in this and didn't take those photos. I mean, maybe ChatGPT knows something we don't, and there is some friend of the girls called Quiche, but it's a funny name, isn't it? Quiche, not Keisha. Anyway, I mean, I'm not here to judge names. Right, so okay, so yeah, so just going back to that first point, I don't necessarily believe that there was any active interaction in a suspicious way for those images to be cached. I think what's far more likely is that those images were cached because they were the most recent interaction with Instagram and potentially an Instagram story, which meant that maybe they did click on them. Essentially, Libby clicked on them, but clicked on them maybe to just look at her friend's story, for example. So this is the first image, and this one's had a fair amount of discussion. I was watching Case by Case's video earlier today, actually, because I had seen bits and pieces discussed, but I wanted to watch it in full and sort of see what was being kind of discussed and what's kind of coming together. And it was really interesting, some of the stuff that Amy had brought up. And so, yeah, we're going to go into this a little bit more. So this image was, I believe, likely shot from around the first trestle area. And I think I spelled trestle wrong there. I never know how to spell trestle. But ChatGPT said Trestle. So I don't know. Anyway, doesn't matter. We all know what I'm talking about here. So the reason I think that I'll explain a little bit further in a minute, but from this point, you can see the creek's northeast bend and the Sunlit Bank. The scene captured does not overlook the eventual crime scene area, which is actually around the corner, as I mentioned. So this isn't really a photo that's necessarily pointing the girls towards the crime scene, because the crime scene is way over here. Instead, it just appears to be a beautiful angle of Deer Creek. We'll go more into why I think that's pictured from that first trestle area and how that's relevant in a minute. But another thing that was discussed was to do with the aspect ratio and dimension confusion. It doesn't look like Instagram ratios. And apparently, there's a simple explanation for that too. Again, if we trust ChatGPT and the research that I've been doing. So the cached photos dimensions don't match Instagram's square or portrait ratios because apparently cached files preserve their original camera proportions. Now that makes sense to me because obviously the app gets the picture in its original dimensions and then it crops it. So that would make sense. So it doesn't mean the image necessarily came from a DM. Instagram stores feed, story, and DM images in the same cache folder without altering their ratios. So the photo is a normal landscape image consistent with standard camera output. So it doesn't tell us much about where that photo came from on Instagram. What it does tell us is that that photo is pretty normal as being taken, I believe, by probably a phone camera or a camera of some sort. I'm going to guess phone camera in this case. And it's just that it's stored in its original dimensions. Sarah says the two photos appear 15 seconds before that last in-car photo is Snapchatted. Yeah. I mean, gosh, this data set is just, there's endless questions, right? You could just analyze it line by line and it would take hours because, you wonder what all the different sort of timeline interactions are. It's so fascinating. Yeah. Hi, RC99. Nice to see you in here again. So why a story view is most plausible, I think that's what I've already mentioned as well. And I think that the story view is most likely because what we notice is that Libby opened Instagram pretty much right after posting to Snapchat or using the Snapchat app. So I'm just, I don't know why that's relevant here. I just realized I'm reading this again going, what are we talking about? But anyway, once she opened it, it would have automatically downloaded recent stories from friends at the top of her feed. Stories are ephemeral, that's an interesting word, and image heavy, making them the most likely reason for two stills appearing in quick succession in the cache. There's no sign necessary that she interacted further, which matches automatic story preloading during a short app session. So her opening it after Snapchat's going to come up a bit later. That wasn't really relevant for that slide, but it's coming. So whose photos are they? And here's where I have a hypothesis. Given the timing and the appearance of the photos, I think these are likely taken by Bree Wilbur and pals. I'm just calling them Bree Wilbur et al. Because the that photo particularly, looks like it's taken around the 1 to 3 p.m. time frame from around the first trestle point. So the second photo looks to be going down by the creek bed, which is exactly where the 4 girls testified to going, or at least the girls that did testify said they went. So let's look at the Knowledge C data and just kind of map this out a bit. So first of all, we've got Bree Wilbur's testimony. So she's asked, did you receive this message from Libby before you left the trail? And when I say left, I'm saying past Freedom Bridge. And she says, yes, we were still on the trail when she messaged me. Okay, and when you responded, what did you say? I told her no, that we just left maybe 10 minutes ago. And so when you were saying 10 minutes ago, are you referring specifically to the high bridge or just the trail in general? And she says to the high bridge. So I think even though she says yes to passing Freedom Bridge, she says we're still on the trails and about 10 minutes after passing the high bridge. So that suggests she wasn't over Freedom Bridge necessarily yet based on time frames of those trails, but it does suggest she was well on her way to that. And that kind of adds up because I guess if we think about Bree Wilbur's timeline from the photos that we have seen, it appears as though she and the friends, they're at the bench at 126, which is, I think it's between the trail split and Freedom Bridge. So to get there, you would be at around the 10-minute or more mark. Obviously, time estimation isn't always great either, but that would add up to, I mean, let's say potentially 130, 135. And what we see here in the data is that the Snapchat app is opened various times, but the most recent one is 142. And then we see, oh goodness, sorry, I don't know why it always comes up like that underneath, but we see the 144 Instagram. So I just wonder if, you know, she knows that Brie Wilbur and Rayleigh were all at the trails. You know, she was potentially hoping, that's Libby, was hoping to catch up with them. And so she, you know, she's messaged them or messaged Brie and said, "Are you still here?" Brie said, "No, we just left about 10 minutes ago." And she subsequently potentially hops onto Instagram and sees Brie's photos, which would have been up by about that point. Now, we know that Brie had photos on a camera. She also had photos on Snapchat, but she potentially had photos on Instagram too. Who knows, right? I think it's a reasonable hypothesis because, yeah, I mean, the caching occurred around 1:44 while the girls were on their way to the trails, roughly 15 minutes before they got to the bridge. And at that point, Brie and friends were leaving the trails approximately 10 minutes after they left the actual Monon High Bridge. Now, this actually matches really well onto the timeline that I've discussed before as well. It's entirely reasonable that Libby's app loaded one of those fresh stories or feed posts, causing the bridge and tree limb images to be stored locally. So the other reason as well is Brie Wilbur does, I'm going back in the wrong direction. Let's just go back this way. Brie Wilbur also does discuss going to the first trestle. She didn't cross the bridge. None of those girls crossed the bridge. I think Brie went out the furthest. I think she went to the first trestle at least. And so these images, I do believe, and we'll look at why, I do believe they marry up quite well with someone taking them from around that area. So they just match the testimony of Brie Wilbur, you know, taking a picture around that first trestle point and then taking a picture down by the creek bed, particularly the left side where there is a lot of those sort of tree limbs, I suppose. It makes sense to me. So so that's one of the reasons I suppose I believe those pictures are potentially from Brie Wilbur and not necessarily sent directly to Libby, but potentially on the feed or in the stories, and Libby's just checked them out because the girls are headed there too, right? And also we know that she's friends with Brie Wilbur and she's been chatting to her or at least sent a message to her at some point in that sort of vicinity as well. I noticed the chat's really quiet. It's everyone gone to sleep. I've got some people in here. If you guys are just listening, taking it in. Okay. I hope I'm always worried when I'm explaining this technical stuff that I'm not making sense because it's not necessarily something I know a lot about, but I find it super interesting, which is why I keep continuing with it. I like the analysis, but I still feel a little bit out of my depth at times because it's certainly, a lot of technical stuff that I don't understand much. RC99 says it was lucky for the abductors that Brie didn't hang out with them at the bridge. Yeah. So unfortunate, isn't it, that nobody else was there at that time. Nobody could intervene. Thanks, Montana Girl. I'm glad you're listening. I hope it makes sense. Please let me know if it doesn't, or if you think that I'm saying anything that's sort of contradictory. So the other point that came up in Case by Cases video, which I thought was super interesting and really went down this rabbit hole too, was that Amy had come across images from Jackson Pierce. And I don't know, I think I had come across that channel before. I do lots of searches for Delphi content, and I think I'd watched maybe parts of some of those videos, but she actually located in one of those videos a photo that looks really, really similar to this Snapchat image. And it was so interesting because I looked at it and I'm like, yeah, you kind of think that they look pretty much the same, right? So this one here is the one in Libby's phone, and this is the one from the Jackson Pierce video. Now, apparently this here was posted on the social media of another young person in Delphi who I believe was connected in some way to Libby, because there were also social media posts of that person talking about Abby and Libby and how sad it was that what had happened to them. So another young person around their age in Delphi had posted this image and some other images around Deer Creek and the trails. Now, are they the same or are they different? So is this image also posted by that person? Now, there's a good case to look at this, certainly, because as we can see, they look super similar. The landscape is obviously similar. We've got the bare trees. It looks like afternoon in sort of wintertime in Delphi. They're literally at nearly the exact same spot. And, we see the two shadows in both pictures. So, of course, I think it's really reasonable to think about whether these photos were taken by the same person, same day, same time frame. So, this is just explaining what I just said out loud. The match does seem to be identical vantage and composition. However, there are slightly different shadows and angles, which proves they're separate photos. We already know that, but probably taken at similar times of the day in the same winter season, but not necessarily from the same photo session. So I'm going to explain that a little bit more, but it seems actually that it potentially isn't suspicious, even though on first look it does look pretty shady. Both photos, as I said, show bare trees, low creek water, mid-afternoon sunlight from the southwest, conditions that are typical of around mid-February. Differences in shadow length suggest, though, that the IG Instagram cached photo was taken slightly later in the afternoon than the JP shot. They could easily be hours or days apart, but within the same sort of season and time frame. So you'll notice here the shadowing here and the lighting is slightly different. And so potentially the sun is at different angles. It's a slightly different, what's the word? I can't even think about it now, but the shadowing is different. Now, could that be because they're at a different angle? Potentially, but I think it could also be explained by them being on a different day or at slightly different times. Now, again, does that sound like I'm just trying to make it simple when it isn't? Possibly, but the other reason that I believe that they may be different people, slightly different times or days, is, yes, Sarah, it does look like a couple of hours apart, I agree. And ChatGPT agreed on that too. There's another reason that I don't believe it's as suspicious as it seems on first look. And that is what we have termed ordinary motivation for similar shots. I'm sorry, you're spot on. You're just like ChatGPT. ChatGPT suggested, around those time frames too. Yeah. So the northeast view from that span is the prettiest side, apparently. I've never been, but it is a very pretty side of Deer Creek. There are bright reflections, open sky, that graceful curve. And so visitors would routinely photograph probably both directions for aesthetics. You see a lot of people's photos of the High Bridge. If you go on Instagram and you put on in Monon High Bridge, you see so many beautiful pictures. You get obviously the ones directly down looking at the bridge straight ahead. You see ones off the first trestle looking down at the water. That's often people who are seeing whether they can see the fish to explore that possibility in the case. But, there's various different angles you can take photos of. And in fact, the videos, the Pierce videos, they actually had shown that the people had also taken photos from the other side of the bridge as well. So I think it's just vantage points, right? It's super pretty. But that particular vantage point of seeing the curve of the creek is super pretty. It's gorgeous. And the colors, the color contrast, particularly in winter, is amazing. So also, interestingly, I started to think, well, whereabouts on the bridge would those people have been when they took that picture? Because they're at almost an identical spot. So what is it about that spot? Now, you've heard me mention the first trestle a few times. And yes, I'm sorry, we're on the same page. The platforms, right? The first trestle, so many people who go to the Monon High Bridge We heard this in this particular case at the trial, but also in general, you see pictures of people on that first trestle. It seems like that's kind of a position to go to if you don't really want to cross the entire bridge, but you want to get a good vantage point of Deer Creek. And so, yeah, like if this corresponds somewhat to that first trestle, then that makes sense why multiple people might have similar photos. Now, I'm not suggesting they took the photo from the trestle, because we can see from the angle of the photo they're not on the trestle, they're on the other side where the edge of the bridge is. But I wondered whether that spot where they've taken that picture is pretty much directly next to the trestle, so around that same way out on the bridge. And again, AI seemed to agree with this hypothesis. So the similarity between the cached images or image and the later publicly posted photos, or I don't know if they were later publicly posted, whenever they were posted, might simply reflect a shared vantage point, not a connection between the photographers. So differences in shadows and brightness suggests that they were taken potentially at different times or even on different days within the same season, or within maybe sort of days or maybe a couple of weeks of each other. So this was the rough location that AI suggested around where those photos may have been taken from. So we've got here the first trestle, and I think, AI just made its own version of this. This is from Google Earth, and it's a bit wonky on here too. So I question sometimes the accuracy as well. I don't know, how does Google Earth take these pictures? But anyway, AI suggested that it would be taken around here, which makes sense when we look at the picture again, which we'll go back to in a minute. Now, this is very close to this first trestle. I mean, it could even be taken here, which was my hypothesis here. Be so keen. I've got to go back and look at people crossing the bridge and see if we can find the exact point. But I didn't get a chance to do that today, but I did get some more screenshots of potential places. So this is from True Crime Designs video, and because initially I looked at that and I thought, but yeah, you don't see this in the picture. Actually, I should go back to the picture so you guys can see. So you see that curve there. You quite like where they are standing. You're right. Actually, you know what? This one could be very close to the first trestle, couldn't it? Because they're not right at the edge, and this one. So potentially it's like just stepping off the first trestle back onto the bridge, but you can see that they're on the end very close to the creek bed, and you can kind of see vastly across this curve. So and I should have put them side by side, but you guys can certainly do that. I can pop these pictures up on the community page a little bit later, but you can see then that the photographer actually would probably be closer to here, because they're seeing the creek bed and they're seeing across here. So then my next question was, but why are they not seeing this here? Because this looks pretty significant, doesn't it? But when you look at True Crime Designs videos, you can see it's actually not. It's there, and it's not super significant. I've got a few angles here. You could be here and you're going to see this clear view. Oh, there you go. I did put it side by side. There you go. Past me had already thought of that. So yeah, like if you see that, that's the sort of edge of the photo, you'd kind of expect that they're maybe going at like this sort of an angle like that. I mean, obviously the what's the word? The angles might be slightly different in these two pictures too, but I do think it vaguely corresponds to trestle one, which makes sense because that's where a lot of people stop, right? And look down, look around, wait for people. That's a vantage point when it comes to the Monon High Bridge. So as I mentioned before, I mean, this is when I let AI write my slides. Many people like to take photos or footage from both sides. I don't know about that, but this person did. They took photos of both sides. So, I guess this is the other side. And you can see this other side isn't super pretty, really, particularly not at that time of the day if these are from the same day. Whereas this side, and I mean, I've cut them quite a bit, but this side is there's more contrast when you see the sky. Sorry, you said I wouldn't be walking further than that. I don't know. I don't think I'd be brave enough. I mean, I'm not super scared of heights, but I mean, those big gaps between the blocks, yeah, that's pretty scary. So I really think a logical hypothesis is that around 1:40ish, Libby posted or messaged Bree on Snapchat. That was part of Bree's testimony. And soon after, she opened Instagram And actually that 142, 143 time frame, it could be earlier. That might not have been that entry in the Knowledge C data. It could have been 130 or one of the other entries. But at some point we know, probably while they were on the way to the trails, she did message Bree. And at some point later, she's opened Instagram. She doesn't seem as keen on Instagram as Snapchat, but she's opened it and potentially has clicked on a story. The app's automatically cached those 2 recent images. That would make sense because Bree Wilbur was actually just there. So those images would be fairly recent as well. And yeah, so these photos look like scenic shots from the first trestle area. They show the upstream view of Deer Creek, and their presence in the cache then reflects normal preloading of familiar content. Bree would have probably shown up as quite high up on her feed or in her stories because these are relatively new posts, because they've only recently left the High Bridge and probably uploaded these, and also because we know Libby was certainly close to Bree. I actually didn't realize until recently that Bree's the sister of Kelsey's boyfriend at the time. I did not realize that. I don't know how I missed that point. So I feel like their presence in the cache reflects normal preloading of familiar content, not evidence of contact or conspiracy. So again, this is why I don't think sometimes my ideas are popular, because sometimes I look at some of these really interesting angles, but I kind of am like, yeah, but I think there's a logical explanation. And I don't do that to prove everybody else wrong or to suggest that there aren't angles here that are problematic. But I always say, if every angle becomes a conspiracy, I feel like it potentially can lose our credibility, because people who believe Rick's guilty are only too quick to say we're conspiracy theorists, right? Not everybody, but certain groups of people. And so when we jump into everything being a conspiracy, I worry that we then, seem like we kind of play into that story. Now, I'm not suggesting that if something does seem conspiratorial, we would hide that because we don't want to be perceived that way. I'm just suggesting that the more we can look like we're considering all angles, and we're considering simple angles as well as more complicated angles, I feel like, we'll never get credibility with some people who believe Rick's guilty because they are very much locked into their point of view. But I don't think it's, like, from my perspective, I don't particularly think that I would find someone credible who's super locked into the other side either. Now, I do believe, 99.9% that Rick is innocent. I do believe he's factually innocent, so I'm quite extreme in that. But I don't believe that every piece of evidence in this case is tampered with or suspicious or proves some other nefarious sort of activity. So, like, for example, I don't tend to believe that the witnesses on the trails that day have lied. So for me, and I know lots of people do, and people who I, really respect and get on with. So it's not suggesting that I don't respect their opinions, but from the research I've done and the things I've put together, I don't believe that Bree Wilbur or Betsy Blair or any of those people are lying. I just believe memory is fallible. I've talked about that so many times. And I just believe that they give as accurate an account as you can. When you're walking on a trails system and you're not expecting this to happen, your memory is not going to be great. Like, my memory is terrible. I can't remember people I've just walked past. I can't remember, what my mum was wearing, and I've seen her multiple times today. I can make a pretty good guess, but I can't remember that. I can't remember what time, I leave to do things, or, unless there's some really obvious timestamp. So, like, I know, for example, today I was in the car at about 5:33 because there was traffic, and I looked at the time and I was like, oh, this traffic's really annoying, because I was hungry and I wanted to get into my clinic because I'm working for my clinic today doing some of this stuff and admin stuff. And yeah, so I can remember that, but I can't remember every aspect of my day, and certainly not when it's a day off and I'm just relaxing, doing social stuff. if there isn't any structure to our day, we often forget that. But yeah, anyway, I digress. What I'm saying here is I don't necessarily believe that there's any suspicious friends who are kind of leading the girls astray. I'm open to the angle of the catfishing or their plan to meet someone at the trails, but I also still don't feel like there's been strong enough evidence for that. And of course, when we talk about the BG video tomorrow, we'll talk a little bit more about that and see, explore all those angles. But yeah, I'm glad you guys agree. Yeah, I'm glad you guys are all kind of open to that and don't feel like I'm just trying to debunk every conspiracy, because I'm not, and I think this is where sometimes people will say that, maybe I'm a covert guilter or veiled guilter because I'm debunking things that may be popular within the Free Rick Allen movement, but I'm not. I think I just have a style of looking at this stuff that means I don't get heavily stuck to one belief system, and I'm not willing to change that, which is interesting because I think people accuse me of that, but I've changed my mind multiple times. And I always say, like, I think changing our minds and constantly coming up with new hypotheses and testing them and then letting them go if they don't kind of hold up, I feel like that's good research. I mean, I studied a lot of research and statistics as part of the psychology degree, and yeah, I really couldn't stand it when people be like, oh, just do some other statistical procedures to find a correlation here. And I'm like, well, then we're just making a correlation. That doesn't feel genuine. I don't agree with trying to find things that fit your narrative, even though I know sometimes people might say that's what I'm doing when I kind of go over and over the points. But it's usually the reason I go over and over points isn't because I'm like not willing to hear what other people think. It's that I've listened to everybody else and I've come up with some ideas, and then sometimes people won't listen to me. So then I just keep going and keep going and keep going. I'm like, please listen to me. So anyone who knows me, I think anyone who's watching the channel now and engaging with me, you guys know that about me, that I evolve and I change, and I'm definitely not suggesting that I have everything right first time and you just have to listen to me. I think it's just that I don't sometimes get hurt. I'm getting hurt a lot more now. I love that you guys are all engaging so positively with me. But, when you first come into this arena and no one really knows who you are and you're a newbie, nobody really listens. And when you're not listened to, you repeat yourself. Anyway, thank you so much, guys, as well for all the chat. I've still got this one last slide to go through, but I wanted to go through the chat because I was just on my soapbox there. Let's see. Let's see. Let's go back to this here. So, oh, goodness, I'm terrible with this chat. Here we go. RC99 said, the theory that Bree and Kelsey were posing as Libby and Abby in the video was very creative, but ultimately wrong. Yeah, I agree. I don't think so. I think that photo, for example, of Abby looks like Abby to me. It doesn't look like it's somebody else. I think I've heard people suggest it could be Bree, but it looks like Abby. The state's narrative is bad, but the state will have borrowed elements of reality to weave into the story. 100% RC99. I'm so with you on that. That is what makes their deception in a way clever, right? I've said that they've got away with it because if you weave enough truth in, then it makes it look like much more credible. It's not that I'm agreeing with the whole state's narrative, but I'm certainly saying that they're going to put elements of truth in. They can't make it so farcical that, because then it would completely fall apart. This gives the illusion of things looking very thorough and good or right. But yeah, they weave those lies or allegedly those other suspicious things into it. I agree, Montana Girl, one should always remain objective. I think I do. Like, gosh, I hate it if I see anything that makes me think twice about Rick's guilt. And I mean, there isn't much now, but in the early days, I lost sleep over it. I was like, I remember being like, he's innocent. I'm going to advocate for this man. This is so unfair, to like, no, I think he's guilty. No, he's innocent. You know, in the early days when I was still just getting my head around all of the information, you know, there wasn't a lot of information because of the gag order, and it's hard to keep up with it all through the trial. I would definitely kind of be a roller coaster. But even now, there are days where something comes up and you're like, let me understand this. What does this mean? And yeah, my heart drops a little bit if I go, you know, is that inculpatory? But generally speaking, I still keep an open mind and I keep digging. And generally, that turns out that it is not inculpatory. But yeah, I definitely try not to be biased. USA Libertarian, thanks for being here again. They say, oh, goodness, my screen. Here we go. They say this is a path that we go down and then appear to go down without duress or even any discussion. Exactly. Now, tomorrow, a little bit later than this time, I'm going to come on and do the Bridge Guy video discussion. Anyone's welcome to join me. I'll pop the StreamYard link up. I've had a few people who are potentially going to join. I hope they do. It would be great because, yeah, some of them have a lot of experience in the Delphi arena. And, yeah, we're going to talk about all of those observations from the video. But, yeah, I'm with you on that, USA Libertarian. It's like they're just ready for that command and they move straight away. It's so interesting. And trying to figure out why they do that is, yeah, it's definitely mind-boggling, right? So yeah, we'll definitely talk about that tomorrow if everyone wants to join us again. Sarah says, if you're not willing to change your mind when presented with factual information, what's the point, right? 100%. Because it's really hard. Human beings like consistency. You know, that's actually a well-known pattern when it comes to sort of neuroscience. We would rather continue to believe the same things, even if they're unhealthy or unhelpful or untrue. Change is really hard. Our brain likes these heuristics, these quick ways of processing information. But ultimately, if we stick with that, then we'll never grow and we'll never change and we'll never evolve. So as much as I don't like to admit I'm wrong, nobody does, particularly when you've been like on your soapbox going on about something, I am willing to do it, even if it's reluctant. USA Libertarian, so they appear to have planned to go down the hill beforehand, not proof, but more evidence they were planning to meet someone. Yeah, I mean, that's still kind of part of what we were just saying. I definitely wonder why they were already planning that. And I mean, it could be that they were planning to meet someone. I also still wonder if Bridge Guy has interacted in some way with them prior to that. It's hard to know, though. It's really hard to know. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about this a little bit more tomorrow night, and you're all welcome to join me in up here talking. You don't have to show your face if you don't want to, but yeah, if you want to share your voice on StreamYard, you're welcome to do that. But if you also just want to share in the chat too, we'll have the chat comments on the screen. It's going to be much more interactive. I've got a few slides of the questions and hypotheses I have, but definitely going to welcome everybody's opinions because it's such a minefield, that video. Laura says, how they got away with that beer gun is beyond me. I know, right? It's ridiculous. This is the path, that beer gun. It doesn't even logically make sense. And I don't know. It's beyond comprehension, really. And Montana, yeah, you agree they were going down the hill anyway. Yeah. Yes, Sarah, that beer gun, ridiculous. Laura, they don't sound upset, more like a planned trip. Yeah, again, I've been a bit on the fence around that too, because sometimes I'm like, yeah, they don't sound that upset. Sounds like they were just going to do that anyway. But then when you look at the angle at which Libby's recording, it really seems covert. And the other thing, and again, we'll get to this tomorrow, but one of the things that I think is quite telling is Abby and Libby don't really talk to each other. I mean, Abby says, there's no path this way, so we have to go down here. But Libby says that, I think. Did I just say Abby said that? Anyway, Libby says that. Abby doesn't really say anything once she actually gets over the edge of the bridge, unless she may say, oh gosh, or oh crap, or what's a gun. I don't know. As she's running past Libby, but I guess if it was an innocent sort of like, we've already planned to go down here, I would have expected a bit more chatter. I would have expected Abby to be like, oh my gosh, I did it. And Libby be like, yay, you got over the bridge. Okay, we're going down here. Although if the plan was to meet someone who they were scared of, like if they were going to, I don't know, sort out some sort of drama, then they could still be scared anyway as well, because they could be solemn. And I've said before that that photo of them in the car, Abby really looks solemn. But I have heard that there's another photo where Libby's poking her tongue out, and it's more fun. So maybe that initial photo's just caught them in a bad moment. But yeah, we will definitely talk about this more tomorrow. Yeah, I could talk about this for hours, but I'll save that for tomorrow. I'm going through our comments. I'm just going to skip the bridge guy ones, not because I'm not interested, guys, but because we're going to talk about this tomorrow. So hold those thoughts, okay? I did not read the full deposition. I'm sorry, no. I really struggle with reading. So, no, I've only looked at the geofencing stuff, and I've heard bits and pieces of what other people have said, but I haven't even actually listened to the full videos that I know a few creators have done around it. So I'm definitely keen to know, because I know there's more about Kegan Kline, and what else did I hear? I heard something about maybe they were talking to Rick at Westville, but I don't know. I'm going to have to, look into that a little bit more. Okay. Diana, you're back. Were you making a chair? There you go. Okay, so I can see. Oh, hi, Sandy. Thanks for joining as well. I can see lots of people wanting to talk about the Bridge Guy video. And as I said, I would love to, but it's getting late, and we are definitely going to do that tomorrow. So that's the only reason, guys. I don't want to stop showing your comments, because you guys have wonderful comments here. But I think that, we'll save that for tomorrow for sure. So last slide, and then I'm going to get off because it is 10:30 and I've got to work tomorrow. It's a clinic day tomorrow. So I'm going to go to work and do my clinic day, and then I'm going to go out for dinner with a friend, and then I'm going to come back to work to do the late live stream to see if we can have some of our other friends who aren't early birds online to have a chat about the Bridge Guy video. So, okay, last slide, summary. So pulling it all together. So 2 cached photos does not necessarily indicate direct communication. Their location of those photos could just be the common vantage point. It doesn't necessarily look at the crime scene or necessarily an organised meeting place. The timing, that's ordinary teen social media rhythm, the ratio, native camera frame, not necessarily to do with proof of DMs, just more that it caches the image in its original form. Their existence, potentially normal story, prefetching from recent posts. So in short, I don't feel that the data at behaviour and witness accounts, I do believe that they all converge on a completely ordinary, non-suspicious explanation. Libby opened Instagram after Snapchat. The app auto-cached a friend's recent bridge photos, and then she put her phone away before heading down the trail. And I think the reason that those particular 2 images were cached was they were the most recent images that she had seen on Instagram, because she doesn't go into the Instagram app again, I don't believe. And I do believe it's likely, it's possible at least, I think it's highly possible that those photos are to do with Bree Wilbur, because she was definitely on the trails around the right time to take those photos, in the right spots to take those photos, and she is friends with Libby, and they had literally exchanged messages around the same time, maybe 5 or 10 minutes earlier at most. So yeah, that's all for today. As I said, not groundbreaking, because it doesn't help us necessarily get any closer to what really did happen, but I think it helps us to maybe hopefully kind of figure out what we do want to focus on, like what stuff is actually going to give us more clues, because I'm not sure that does. That may give us clues around timelines and things, but I'm not sure that it gives us clues about anything else particularly. Oh, thanks for viewing. No, guys, sorry, that's Canva saying that, but I'm still here. I'm just going to read the last few chat messages before I go. Oh, the Flora investigation, yeah. It's so tragic, isn't it? I can't even imagine sometimes when I'm watching these things, because, I think we compartmentalize, and I definitely do that a lot with the work I do as well. Like, you kind of put it to the side and don't really kind of try too much to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. Like I do obviously for my work, but not permanently stay in that. And so, I watch crime shows or documentaries, and it's like a case to be solved. But then when you actually imagine being the person in that case, it's just horrific. And certainly as a parent, I mean, anyone knows that losing children would be horrific. Losing anyone we love is horrific. But as a parent, to lose 4 children, I mean, if I even, God forbid, lost one, gosh, it makes me cry even thinking about it. It's just so tragic. Those beautiful little girls. Yeah, it really is heartbreaking. I don't even know how you survive that. But amazing resilience for that mum. Yeah, and just so sad that they didn't even. Yeah, I mean, gosh, if they laid them on the fire station concrete floor, that is disgusting. It really is. It's so dehumanizing. These are little babies. These are human beings, but little beautiful babies that had a horrific death. Just awful. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. It's really, really heartbreaking. So really great to connect with everybody. Thank you all for joining again. I hope I wasn't too rambly. Sometimes when I finish up, I'm like, gosh, I was just rambling. I hope people aren't finding this so boring. I hope that it's useful talking about this stuff. I like diving into all aspects of the case and understanding every little inch of the case. And I think obviously a lot of people do. Delphi is a bit of an obsession. So I think so many of us are quite happy to look at every little angle in detail. And I think that's why a lot of people stick around and watch my videos as well as all of the others. I know I do that. I'm willing to watch, a million videos on this case to get lots of little details and snippets. And I'm so glad that there are still a significant amount of creators talking about this. There's lots of people still online in Reddit talking about it, because I think it's such an interesting case, and it's so nice to be able to share the obsession with others. So I really appreciate it. The people who have subscribed and joined in the chats on my channel have definitely been a wonderful source for me, because I just want to talk it out with people and hear other people's ideas and vent about some of this stuff. But yeah, well, without further ado, I'm going to log off because I've got to get some sleep. But lovely to see you all. You're all amazing, and I will see you tomorrow night. It will be not this time tomorrow night, but the equivalent of an hour and a half after the time it is now, wherever you are. So for the Australians out there, it's going to be pretty close to midnight. But for the Americans and Canadians and the British and people all around the world, I don't know what time it will be for you guys. I think ChatGPT will get it right, though, if you ask them. But I think actually what's really good is that YouTube brings up the time it's going to be for your area. At least it does for me. So I have already put the next stream coming up. So you'll have that. And there's more to come. There's lots of stuff that I'm working on that we will add over the next week or so. All right, guys. Take care. Bye. Bye, Diana. Hopefully speak to you soon. Bye. Bye, everybody, by the way. I'm not just saying bye to Diana. Bye to everybody else, too. Diana's just my buddy. You're all my friends, but Diana and I, we have a lovely friendship. Anyway, sorry. No one else needs to know about that. Bye.